Optimancers, Chris here. So this is a post I saw on Reddit, and I thought it was a really interesting question. So it's titled, "Is a Great Worm Red Dragon CR39 Too Much?" I'm DMing a party of 6 to 8 players, and they just reached level 15. They got too excited and jumped into the big bad's lair. I've warned them that this monster is way too strong, but here we are. Should I homebrew a weaker creature? I'm only asking because this is my first campaign, and I don't know if I'm being unfair by using a homebrew creature to begin with. And then we have a link to the monster, which takes us to the D&D wiki. So the first thing I want to say to all viewers is that this site is for homebrew that's posted by randos on the internet. And it's probably a terrible resource for a new DM, because you don't know who designed this monster or anything else on this site. They're probably not a professional game designer, and their ability to design stat blocks for D&D could be good, but it could also be absolute trash, and you don't know. Now, if you are an experienced DM, maybe you can go through the creature's stat block and figure it out for yourself, whether it's a well-designed creature or not. But for a new DM, I think you should stay away from sites like this. That said, I don't think it's unfair to use homebrew. Some of the most interesting encounters use stat blocks that the players don't necessarily expect. And on sites like this, they can be a way to get some good ideas for homebrew, even if you don't use the monsters themselves. But unless you have some experience with monster design, you may not be able to sort out the good from the bad. So we start out with the creature name, and then the very next line says Colossal Dragon Chaotic Evil. So what is colossal in terms of size category? In previous editions, there were colossal size monsters, but in 5th edition, which this monster is supposed to be, Gargantuan covers everything from a 20 by 20 controlled area and up. So when the first entry on this creature isn't using 5th edition rules, that's a red flag a new DM might not notice. But the purpose of this video isn't to break apart this homebrew. It's to answer the question, and to answer the bigger question, which is, should encounters ever be impossible for the PCs to win? And I'm interested in your opinions on this topic, so let us know in the comments what you think. But for this video, I'm going to share my own opinion for what it's worth. So let's start with this specific scenario. Weird Homebrew CR39 Big Bad aside, the players have stumbled into the lair of what is presumably the final fight of the campaign before the DM expected it to happen. Now, we don't know the details on how this happened, but a DM can't always predict what players are going to do. Maybe they use some kind of divinations and teleports that the DM wasn't expecting. 15th level characters can pull a lot of tricks that sometimes you don't predict. So that's the situation that, say, you or I find ourselves in as a DM. What is the next step? Well, the question this DM doesn't answer is, what's the social contract between them and their players? Specifically, what is their social contract involving risk? I mean, if it is my table, real risk for the well-being of the player characters exists. That's not true of every table, and that's okay. There isn't one right social contract that every table needs to have. If a group of players likes a game where their characters can never die, so be it. Personally, if I'm a player, I like the sense of danger that knowing my character can be lost brings. And I've had characters die for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or I just had bad luck. And I don't get upset when that happens. I get upset if my character dies because I made a stupid decision, and I'm not that upset. I mean, I'll kick myself for a bit. Now, that said, if a bad DM were to kill my character in a way I considered unfair, I would be upset. But I have been fortunate enough with DMs that nothing like that has happened to me for a long, long time. But if that kind of social contract exists, where player characters are supposed to be in danger, then redesigning the encounter so the players are going to win is not a good idea. How disappointed would I be discovering we could just walk into the biggest, baddest fight that is even possible in the campaign, only to have the DM reduce the difficulty so we could win? That would mean there is no real risk. If we make bad decisions, we get rewarded by the DM changing things so we come out on top anyways. And again, if that's the way you play and you enjoy it that way, great. But to me, that's not the most fun way to play the game. Now that said, I totally understand this DM's predicament. It's one thing to have risk, but if the encounter ends up being a TPK, then that's the end of the campaign. I mean, I've seen DMs continue a campaign after TPK, and we all make new characters, and it's fine, but 15th level is a pretty high level, so I'm guessing this isn't the second or third session. With this kind of time invested with these characters, if they all get wiped out, then I don't see the campaign continuing, and the DM is right to want to avoid that outcome. So what the DM has elected to do is warn the players by telling them the monster is way too strong for them to fight, and it sounds like they've ignored that advice. Perhaps the players assume the DM will alter the encounter to make it winnable. Again, this comes down to the social contract, but sometimes we don't talk about the social contract, we just kind of assume what it is, and often that works. But, if I'm a player in this campaign and it feels like the DM has decided that none of our characters are ever going to die, I might very well assume that there's no real risk of death here either. And just telling the players that an encounter is too strong for them, it doesn't feel great, does it? Like it is super metagamey. Here's some information your characters don't have, so your characters can make decisions based on this out-of-character knowledge. I mean, ooh. Of course, that information could be something the characters do know. So it's another thing entirely to remind your players of that. Your characters maybe know this dragon is the most powerful dragon to ever exist, by a long shot. I mean, CR 39. Anyways, don't tell them the ridiculous challenge rating, but a CR 39 dragon probably has a rep. But here's another thing you could do. This is a great time to talk about the social contract and make sure you and your players are on the same page. It is okay to talk about this stuff out of character, and even to pause your game to do it. Do the players know that their characters might die? Do they understand that some encounters might not be winnable for them? If you don't know the answer to these questions, you should find out before you go any further. Because if you and your players aren't on the same page, this is a good time to stop and get on the same page, because your players have given you a very strong hint that they're not expecting an impossible encounter, even though you pretty much told them. So the social contract that they assume is in place may be very different than the one you do. But let's say you have that talk. Let's say everyone is on the same page. Player characters are not invincible. They can die. The whole party can die. Some encounters are going to be impossible to win, at least for now. And then, by either their decision or by yours as a DM, the party finds themselves in a fight they can't win. Is this something a DM should ever allow to happen? The quick answer, in my opinion, is sure. But you might want to think about the purpose and the planning of that encounter more than, say, a random encounter with goblins on the road. So first, why would we ever do this? I mean, in this specific example, the players have pretty much forced the situation, but as a DM, I think it's just fine to plan impossible encounters if they serve a purpose. And no, I'm not saying a TPK serves a purpose. I mean, I guess it does serve a purpose, but probably not a purpose you're actually after. Here's one benefit of impossible encounters. If the world you're creating is something you want to feel like a real place, then maybe every encounter a party has shouldn't be tailor-made for them. Like, what are the odds that you never encounter anything beyond your abilities, but as you level up, these more powerful creatures just start showing up? In Lord of the Rings, the first encounter the hobbits have is with a ring wraith. Encounter number 1. What'd they do? They hid and ran. Another purpose is to introduce your players and their characters to future challenges. An encounter with a CR 39 dragon when the party is low level will sure as heck inform them what they're up against, and it's probably something they would want to put off until they're ready. The Curse of Strahd campaign does this purposefully. Strahd is supposed to keep showing up right from the start of the campaign, and as the characters work their way through it. It fleshes out the big baddie, and the characters even build this adversarial relationship with them, so when that big fight occurs that the characters can actually win, it feels super satisfying. So how do you even run an encounter like this without having a TPK? Well, first and foremost, the players need to be aware of the social contract. You can have unwinnable encounters if the players don't understand that some encounters are unwinnable. Otherwise, they're not going to likely realize that a TPK is something that's possible and that they need to avoid, not the DM. So they'll be expecting some Deus Ex Machina to come and save them when you haven't planned for any such thing. But even with an impossible encounter, and I think this is the most important point of having an impossible counter at all, is if they remove all player agency and the outcome is predetermined, then as a player, that is not satisfying. Big impossible monster and get beat up and we run away again. Fun. Or even worse, and I've seen some DMs share encounters like this online before. An encounter where a big bad shows up and beats up the characters and then just lets them live and leaves. They lose interest in killing them or something. Or where the characters are fighting an impossible battle, then the big bad shows up, kills the enemy, and leaves. What agency do the players have in those kinds of scenarios? None. There's no point to an encounter where everything is predetermined. If I'm not going to have any agency as a player, I'd rather read a story in a book. So here is my suggestion to DMs who might want to consider including impossible encounters in their games. Most encounters in D&D have rigidly defined metrics for what winning is and losing is. If the monsters died and all the characters lived with minimal resources lost, then you won. If it is a TPK, you lost. And the gray area is everything in between. So with an impossible encounter, you have to redefine those metrics. There should still be a way for characters to win, but winning means something else in an impossible encounter. Maybe winning is the characters just not dying. But if the characters can just run away, well, that could work, but it's not really interesting. You haven't given them agency. They have to run, and they can just do it. Sounds like a predetermined outcome to me. So back to our initial question. Assuming the DM has had the conversation with the players about the social contract, everyone's on the same page, and the players have chosen this encounter despite knowing it's the big bad they're facing, and the DM now has time to plan this encounter, the DM has an interesting opportunity here to make the encounter fun. First question, how will the characters possibly survive? You gotta answer this. For this video, I'm going to make one suggestion that might get your creative juices flowing. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this, but this is kind of a starting point. So the encounter is in a volcano. So maybe the dragon is resting in a cave with their treasure hoard. Dragons love to sleep on their treasure, right? So, Mr. DM, is anyone in the party immune to fear? If not, you need to do something. This monster frightens and paralyzes anyone who fails a DC 29 wisdom saving throw. Always know the stats and abilities of the monsters, because if this catches the DM by surprise, there is a good chance that the whole party is going to fail this saving throw and it is game over. Now, maybe they've had a hero's feast because they're prepped for a big encounter and they are 15th level, and maybe not. If not, then maybe they need to find something on the way to the encounter that will provide at least one of them immunity or a guaranteed saving throw or whatever. I mean, it could even be as simple as a scroll of Hero's Feast, even as part of the treasure of one of the encounters as the characters make their way towards the really big bad. So the party enters this cavern. Then you give them a chance to get a look at their surroundings. They'll notice the treasure has a mix of coins and other valuables and magic items. Have a map, show the location of the party, the location of the magic items they can see, the location of the dragon, and any other features to make things more interesting, opportunities for cover, for hiding, whatever. Maybe there's other creatures in here that are subservient to the dragon. But even if the dragon is alone, the dragon's passive perception is friggin' 38, with a +6 wisdom modifier, so I wonder what its proficiency bonus is supposed to be, +32? Anyways, this is the creature. I don't care if those characters are using Pass Without Trace, the dragon is going to notice them. I'm not even sure I'd have the players roll until I've determined that every single one could possibly achieve a 38 on a stealth roll. So the dragon has noticed them and initiative is going to be rolled. The dragon has a +0 initiative. It's the one thing it's actually not good at. So there's a good chance it won't go first. In fact, there's a decent shot if we're talking a high level party and they actually are built around initiative, it could go last, but it doesn't really matter the order because it's going to do the same thing on its turn. It's going to do the same thing when it's not its turn. But on its turn, It's going to move to the characters, and it really only has one option. It's a pretty straightforward monster. It's going to do Frightful Presence, Bite, and 4 claw attacks. So, Frightful Presence, normally not a game ender with dragons, but in this case, it may be if you haven't made sure at least one player character has the ability to resist this. Then the dragon, with its 150-foot fly speed, has no problem moving up to the characters, and so then it's chomp, claw, 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 claw. Does this thing claw with its hind legs like a cat or something? Don't know, or maybe it just moves really fast with its claws. Anyways, none of the damage here one-shots a 15th level character. Once again, know the stats of your creatures. Think about these things beforehand. Impossible encounters need to be planned carefully. And what you would do is you would start attacking one of the characters, and once that character goes down, you'd move on to the next. You wouldn't finish them off. 15th level characters should have over 100 hit points, so it's unlikely you'll drop more than one, and there should be zero chance of a one-shot death. So that's the dragon's turn. What about the player's turns? Well, the very first player character is going to go. Maybe they attack and realize armor class 28 is really hard to hit. Or maybe they cast a spell to find out this thing has crazy high saves, and it can legendary resist if they fail. Now, they could try something like maybe a maze spell. That might get them a little bit of time to do something before this thing reappears, because it does have a really high intelligence. Or maybe any of the characters that go before the dragon are paralyzed at this moment and they can do nothing. One way or another, at this point the players are likely going to realize they aren't going to be killing this dragon today. And then after one of them takes a turn, the dragon is going to take their legendary action. 3, to be precise. Doesn't want the characters just running away, so it uses its breath weapon on the ceiling of the cavern entrance. Let the players see you count out those 40d6 and then roll them all for the damage. And then this causes a cave-in at the entrance, trapping the characters with the dragon. Dragon can always dig itself out after it has a belly full of adventurers. So now we have a set encounter. Now, I have to think that if you are on the same page as the players and you have your social contract and they've seen this thing go and one of the characters is almost certain to drop and another one is probably halfway down, and then they saw a legendary action that fortunately wasn't just at them, that does 140 points of damage, and they gotta know if this legendary action comes up again that they're in loads of trouble. And they've got to know that at this point, the metrics of this combat are not going to be whether they kill this thing or it kills them. Because if they force that situation, there can only be one outcome. They're going to die. If they haven't figured that out, I don't know what to say. But it should be obvious at this point that they have to figure out how to escape. And when the cavern collapses behind them, they have to figure out that escaping isn't going to be as easy as just backing away. So, how are the characters going to escape? Well, there's a real possibility that's already built into their characters. After all, they are 15th level. Maybe they have a magic item. Maybe they have a teleport spell prepared. They're not instantly dead. There's no way they can instantly die in this encounter. The dragon's already used its legendary action, so they're going to have some turns, even if they don't have a maze spell prepared. Maybe one of the magic items in the Horde is a spell gem holding a teleport spell. Maybe something else, but what we want is for the players to have to think about it and come up with a decision on how to get out. And if they can come up with something other than the magic item you set there as an insurance policy, great. But we want something that if the players use good tactics, it can get them out before they're killed. If it is a teleport spell, I would say that's the most likely. They would all need to be within 10 feet of the spellcaster. Maybe some of them are paralyzed and they would need to be dragged into range before the spell's cast. Maybe they have to plan their turn so the person who can cast teleport is holding their action until everyone can get in range. If the characters are really tactical, maybe they can even grab some armfuls of the dragon's treasure first and actually walk away from this with some kind of benefit. You could have one of those pieces of treasure being some kind of MacGuffin, giving the characters a clue that might set them on a quest to gain the items or people necessary to defeat this Goliath dragon when they meet him again at level 20. Lots of opportunities here to make this interesting and move your campaign forward. But you know what? Maybe they can't get everyone into range of the teleport before this monster's going to get another turn, so they have to do it anyways, and somebody dies. Well, welcome to D&D hard mode. If their scorched corpse is left behind, then it's new character time, as they won't have a body to resurrect. Let's see how eager they are to wander into the Dragon's Lair a second time. But it could have been worse. And that's the sweet spot. The characters didn't kill the dragon, but they all could have died. And they had to use their agency as players to figure out how to avoid that. There was no predetermined outcome. And there was a metric for winning, and there was a metric for losing. And ideally, they don't lose, just like any encounter. Now, whether this exact encounter design that I kind of came up with on the fly is right for your table depends on you and your players. You know them, I don't. Maybe the solution needs to be easier or harder, but ideally the encounter has metrics for winning and for losing, and the actions of the players will determine the outcome they have, and what the severity of any of the consequences will be. This can be a satisfying resolution for a player. If winning is getting away, and you are the one who figured out how to do that, and were able to make it happen, that can feel as good as killing a monster that you can actually kill. Anyways, that is my opinion on the matter. So until next time, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.